It's a How I Lead episode where we bring in the everyday guy or gal and just ask them, how is it that you lead? You've been given this calling just like we've all received callings. Now, what are you doing? How's it working? What's not working? And I have the opportunity to talk with Angela Sturgeon from New Albany, Indiana, and 2-hour drive stake. She's a stake primary president. You know, it's one of these callings that us in the Wasatch Front just don't understand. We got it too easy here. But Angela definitely gives us some insights. Now she approaches this and really in a loving manner. You can just feel the heart of Angela as she talks and shares her unique background of being a convert, going through a divorce, losing a spouse, and just so much. And then approaching these callings, you know, especially as stake primary president with no, personal primary experience, and she wasn't raised in the church, and how she approaches that, and how she focuses on spiritual resilience and empathy and flexibility and building a culture of love and all the things. So let's jump into it. Here's my interview with Angela Sturgeon from Indiana. Angela Sturgeon, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast.
So excited to be here.
Now you are in Indiana, is that right?
New Albany, Indiana. They call it Kentuckiana around here because we're right on the Ohio River across from Louisville, and we're all kind of blended together. So
interesting. So what's the name of the mission that you're in? Do you know?
Well, my stake is in the New Albany, Indiana stake.
Okay, so it has its own stake, and people are just great and happy out there. And I mean, I've heard good things about Indiana. I visited a few times, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because I did move here from Utah. So when I got here, going to church was a lot different, and it was a really cool experience for me coming in. So.
And how long you been there now?
This December will be 10 years.
Wow, that's great. So maybe another 10 years.
Yeah.
It's a good place to live. That's great. And you're currently serving as the stake primary president. How long have you been in that role?
About 2.5 years, almost 3.
Okay. And now, did you have some ward primary presidency experience before then, or?
No.
You didn't? You just jumped right in?
Smidge. I mean, I had just been called as the stake primary secretary, and I was in there for just a couple of months, and then they reorganized it. And I thought, well, that was fun. I just started kind of getting down what I was supposed to do. And it was my first ever stake calling. So I was like, well, okay, that was a great experience. But then right after that, our president got released, and then I thought we would all get released. And then they were like, we're asking you. And I was a little surprised because my blinders were just in the manual with like, what do I do as a secretary? And then, so I had just barely gotten my feet wet in there.
That's great. That's great. Now, what do you remember just sort of getting oriented in that calling, the first few weeks or first few months? I mean, was there a specific focus, or what do you remember from that time?
Well, it was huge for me because first of all, I'm single, so I'm not your traditional, I guess that's just the way I would see it. And so it was just a little bit different dynamic for me coming in. And I really honestly, because I don't have like a priesthood holder in my home. I don't totally understand how all it works with all the guys on the high council and like who's over what. And so really, when I first got in there, I was just trying to figure out like, what is the structure and how does it work? And then getting out and going into all the different wards and branches was almost like visiting different states or even countries, because even though we're all in the same stake, we're so spread out and the needs are so different. So it really just felt like, kind of getting my bearings straight to really understand how does this all function, and especially with me as a president. And then, so there was a lot of inexperience for me coming in there. But.
Yeah. And I mean, was that something you felt like I mean, was happening more internally, just the, worrying about, stepping up to this calling, or were there obvious things where, that in experience kind of made you think?
Well, I think it was a combination probably of both,
Uh-huh.
because the other key component was that since I am a convert to the church and since I had been a member, I was in primary when I first got baptized, but since then I have been in Relief Society or Young Women's, or I was in um, uh, um, with all the Weeblos, and because that's where like I spent a bulk of my time, was in those callings. And so then when I came into the stake, I mean, again, I didn't grow up in the primary, so I didn't know the music. I felt like I really needed to kind of rely on my counselors, because I felt like they had so much more experience than I did going into it. And so it's been a very humbling experience. And yeah.
Well, that's why they give us counselors, right? Uh, to round out the experience of the whole group. So that's great. So how many stakes are in your, or I'm sorry, how many wards are in your stake?
We have 10 wards and branches
Okay.
combined, because some of them are so small, they're definitely considered branches.
Yeah. So, and you said it's pretty spread out area. So what sort of mileage or drive time are we talking about to get around to those wards?
Yeah, I mean, the furthest out is about 2 hours. And so, yeah, we're, the stake center, thank goodness, is pretty centrally located, but it's still, a lot, especially for those other people coming into the stake. But um, as far as, us getting out, we try to get out as much as possible throughout the year, and then have as many touch contacts as we can to have the people coming in. So whether it's Zoom or, just being creative in how we can all get together.
Yeah. And so, and you make your best effort to visit these wards, throughout the year, but do you have a specific schedule, or how do you handle that with your presidency?
Yeah, it's kind of nice because it's set up. Basically, they do it alphabetical order, so we just start off, in our Charlestown ward, and then we go throughout the year. Um, my background was, like I said, when I came in, like I'm the only member in my family. So I had no like knowledge of that. I married my missionary,
Oh,
and
wow.
and and it was great. I mean, we didn't get married right away because, he was obviously on a mission, and it was a few years after that. But then we got divorced. And so I was then in like a new dynamic again, as far as like callings. I don't know. It was just different and interesting. And then I got remarried, and we were everything was going fine, but he was bipolar, and he ended up taking his own life.
Oh,
And
wow.
so my whole marriage, like years, I've been single more than I've been married. And so, as far as like priesthood holders and understanding like the structure of it all, like I I have just I didn't really know.
Yeah.
And then, not obviously, to my family, my background, I also kind of grew up in the foster care system, so I didn't really have like a
Wow.
strong, family upbringing, and all of that. So when I heard the missionaries talking, it just felt like, home. And
Yeah.
so, but I feel like my whole journey, especially coming into leadership positions, it's always been like, I got called as Relief Society president, and I'm like, I didn't even know you called counselors to, do
Yeah.
that or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean? Like it was just all super new. And then after my husband had passed away, and I've been a flight attendant my whole life, and I was based in Salt Lake. I kind of drifted a little bit from the church, not on purpose, but just the way that it worked out, and working on Sundays and things like that. So then moving back here, I felt a huge, strong pull to move here. And that is really how I feel like my conversion began. And I mean, I knew when I heard the missionaries, but through that whole time, I was just kind of not really, it wasn't all sinking in. And then when I moved here, I feel like it all just started to click and that conversion happened. And then that's when I started back and I got called in the Relief Society presidency here. And then I got called into the stake. So I feel like I've
Yeah, that makes
only
sense.
really been active like that whole time in that frame. So anyway, so I just thought it would be good to give you that
Yeah, no,
background.
that's really helpful. And I'm curious, like, because I'm encouraged when I hear of individuals with a past like yours, where it's like it's not the storybook, the mission, the temple marriage, the kids, the mission, the kids going on missions, and all those things. Like, it's not the perfect scenario or the ideal, I should say, scenario. So I'm encouraged when somebody who doesn't come from that ideal background is asked to serve in these callings, because it brings diversity, it brings deeper understanding of issues, deeper empathy for what maybe similar people with similar backgrounds are experiencing, and hopefully keeping them engaged in the gospel. And so I'm just curious, like, and as a church leader, maybe the stake president just takes it for granted that of course you call counselors, of course how this works, and of course how music time works, or whatever it is, right? Is like any thoughts or advice come to mind, like if whether you were to go back in time and like um, prepare those other leaders to help prepare you, or to help you feel more comfortable in these roles earlier on, rather than just sort of wandering around confused? Or
Absolutely. Well, I think it's just a matter of building that relationship, like legitimately taking the time to get to know each other, because I do feel like, especially for me as the state president, I didn't grow up here. I didn't know everybody. Like a lot of
yeah,
people just blend in and know each other. But as I started to branch out and see, because I was living in my bubble in my ward, it's like that relationship that I have built with the other presidencies and getting to know them and trying to meet them where they are. I think, like you said, flip the script on, whether it's me with the state presidency or just those things, getting to know each other a little bit more, and being able to understand their perspective, because it really is that there's been so many times, even still sometimes I'll hear something and I'll be like, I don't know that acronym, I gotta hurry up and go find out our little cultural
yeah,
verbiage. And so that's where I think that building that relationship and just understanding, because also too, we have a lot of people who have been baptized and then they get into these callings and they're like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And so I kind of started to take it for granted myself, living
yeah,
in Utah and then moving here and then coming in and meeting those counselors. Um, they they were like, wait a minute, can we backtrack a little bit? Because yes, we have the handbook and that's amazing, but there's so much interpretation there.
yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Does this maybe feed into the first principle you sent as far as embracing flexibility and personal growth, or is that kind of indifferent?
No, I think that's perfect, because that's exactly, I think a lot of times we come in with these preconceived notions of
Yeah.
what it's supposed to look like or what I'm supposed to do. And I know for me, especially, I definitely had that idea. And so when I came into this calling, I thought it's supposed to look a certain way. So I got to hurry up and like try to figure out all the ways to make it look like that. And then I started to realize as I would go out and I'm in a branch with 3 primary children and one person called in primary, that it doesn't look like that. And so we have to tailor it and be flexible. And it's so cool though, because then you go back to Heavenly Father and you're like, all right, this is kind of not in the handbook. And so it's exciting to feel the growth of the flexibility, where at first I looked at it and it was scary. But
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
And was there anything specific? I don't know if a story comes to mind or ways that leaders can stimulate that flexibility and personal growth, or I mean, was there a certain autonomy you were given, maybe by the stake president, or I don't know, certain approaches or tactics you did, or
Well, I feel like it was really nice because in my presidency, it was so diverse. We had so many different personalities with different talents. And so being able to counsel together, again, building that relationship to understand, like, what is your perspective? Where are you coming from? And then as we would counsel together and we talk about coming back from a ward or branch conference, you could see that there was so many different aspects to what we could do here. And so just as far as a presidency, we would get together, we'd say, hey, these are the things we think could help and support and uplift. But then we'd go back and then we would get, some more input from them, and they'd be like, actually, no, this is what we need. And it really was about like listening to the struggle and being real in it. A lot of times we're all just super overwhelmed. And so it was like, what can we do to support? And sometimes it was as simple as literally getting on our knees and praying for them individually by name, taking their name to the temple, putting it on the prayer roll, or just trying to be creative in what we could do to support in their particular situation.
yeah. Anything else coming to mind as far as the principle of embracing that flexibility and personal growth?
I would just say that it's relying on Heavenly Father and not our own view of what we think it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Awesome. Next one is fostering spiritual resilience. How does that look?
Well, uh, again, I think coming from a background where it wasn't traditional, growing up like in and out of foster care, and then coming into the church and gaining a testimony, line upon line, precept upon precept, it's it's so interesting because I feel like at first I thought, how in the world is someone like me coming from a background like I have coming into, with all these people with all these amazing experiences, you know, what would I have to offer? And then it dawned on me as I was going through in the calling that I have this resilience within me, and then I could see it in so many others. But then it was like, how can we, even if your confidence is blown in something, whether it's in your calling or maybe in your testimony, and then it's like, wait a minute, this is growth. That's what it's supposed to, this is what we're supposed to be going through to be able to, you know, get to where we think we're supposed to go. But Heavenly Father teaches us in a way that is so different because it's so unique to each individual. And stepping up and stepping out of our comfort zone and doing things, and it literally is resilience. And what I figured out was it's spiritual resilience. And I didn't understand that for a long time.
Yeah. Are there any specific examples, narratives, whether from your own life or as you've seen others go through this, or you've helped others kind of, you know, follow those principles?
Absolutely. Again, I'm thinking of a time when I didn't on purpose, but I had kind of slowly gone inactive. I always think of it as like you go to the beach, you put your stuff down, and you go get in the water and you start swimming around and you're having a good time, and you come back out and you're like, where's my stuff?
Yeah.
And so it was like, wait a minute, where am I? And I had done that, and I had been a flight attendant for a long time, and I was working on Sundays, and I thought I could hang on to that no matter what. I was like, you know, in my jump seat, and we would bank, and we'd be like in San Francisco by the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Beauty of the Earth song would pop in my mind, and I would slowly say prayer, and I'd be like, this is okay. I'm maybe not at church today, but I have this. But what I didn't realize is how much I really needed to be back at church, like literally sitting there partaking of the sacrament. And so as I had started to realize this and really feel it, especially as a mother raising my children, I I came to church and I saw that, obviously this was a huge need, and I needed to be physically in the building with these people I love, learning and listening and soaking up, all of their experiences. But I also I started taking the spiritual self-reliance classes, and that really taught me, like, what is spiritual resilience, and so as I would work through some of those things, and then as I got into a calling, I started to see it, and it just started to open up that these people who are working so hard wherever they are in their life and doing the best they can in their callings, and then they come and they teach these beautiful little kids. It's like, that's spiritual resilience. You're just trying no matter what. You keep kind of get up and shake it off and go, all right, I was there, but now I'm here, and I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to do the best that I can with what I've got.
Yeah. Do you find that like maybe some of the primary presidents in your stake, like do you catch them in some of these moments where maybe that resilience is faltering, or is there any other way that like you find yourself, preaching this message in your calling?
Well, I would say I think it's more like because we have built these relationships, that hopefully my hope is that when we sit down together and we counsel together, whether it's us coming out for ward conference, in trainings, we do quarterly trainings together on Zooms, but because we have so many touch points where we can open up and have that dialogue, like it's like vent and say, what is it that you're going through? What is
Yeah.
it that you need? What is it that you're struggling with? And so I feel like because we are kind of talking as friends, it just organically comes about. And I can say, hey, have you guys thought of, this is something that I've seen happen in another ward or a branch, and it might be able to help you. Or it's just the fact that they feel comfortable enough to be able to say, this is something I'm struggling with. Can you help me out?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Anything else about spiritual resilience that we need to talk about before we move on?
I feel like that it's just a central component,
Yeah.
because again, the main thing is we're all growing, and it's, it's sometimes we're going to feel, doubts or whatever it is, or have a moment where you're like, wait, what? And then you realize it's okay. It's all part of the growth process. Just
Yeah.
keep it going.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and just that encouragement of staying out of like the shame messages, like there's something wrong with me, and going to, I'll figure this out.
Yeah,
I'm resilient. I just got to keep going, right? And the growth is happening. So
exactly.
cool. All right, cultivate a culture of love and growth. This is another good dovetail off of that last principle.
Well, I think again, I feel like when you think about how much Heavenly Father loves you, and he knows you and understands how to communicate with you, I feel like that is the key in leadership as well, because it is so tough sometimes, just feeling like, how do I balance all the things that are going on in life, work, being a parent, callings, and then being able to feel like, am I doing enough? And so I think when you can just basically make an environment where people feel safe, that it's like, I do know that I'm loved. My prayer is that no matter what we are all going through, maybe it's something huge or maybe it's not, but that they feel loved, and that we have been working on these relationships. We have cultivated this love, that you just know that everything that you're going through, you have somebody to rely on and feel supported with. And I think that's just, like, we're all going to go through very difficult things. Because the other thing I think is that when you get in some of these callings, I feel like you think it's okay, everything's going to be fine, we're going to be protected, and there's
Yeah.
not going to be any major obstacles, but that's again where I love how President Nelson basically is saying, when you do these things and you are striving to think celestial, and you are putting yourself in a situation where you're willing to do whatever it takes in a calling or just as a disciple, that it is not going to not come without opposition. And I love how, like, studying in D&C this year, we have really just been seeing, and I feel the pain and the heartache of all of them in there. And I think, man, I want to be more like them and have the stuff that they're made of. And so that feeling of love and support, no matter what is going on in your life, is, I think, super important.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just being present with those people, right? Is they're experiencing that and letting them know that you're willing to sit with them. And any other, like, I'm just trying to think, those who understand the principle but want to connect the dots better as far as the application of it. Anything else come to mind?
As far as the love and cultivation,
Yeah.
well, I think it's really in just those moments where there's real life happening, and you can be there for somebody else. So, for instance, we have what we call windshield time, as we're
Yeah.
driving around to all these different stakes and branches, and we're able to share the things that are going on in our lives and the struggles that we have. And it's so intimate, and it has just gotten to where it's like you feel free to be able to literally cry and get it out and be like, this is the place in the world, besides like maybe going to the temple where you're by yourself with these feelings and thoughts, but you are together and you are feeling this love that is, like, eternal. It's, you just feel safe. So it's a safe, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And I love the concept of windshield time. I'm just thinking maybe those words along the Wasatch Front that don't doesn't require windshield time to go out and visit, or think, or it's very, or extremely short. But just creating those moments of like sitting with the person and allowing it, the relationship to breathe a little bit. And, maybe we're talking about nothing or very superficial things to the deep and more profound things, but creating that space, and connection is really, really important, and there's 100 ways to do that, but something to think about, I think.
Yes. Well, and I think my hope is, because we feel that way as a stake presidency, that when we go in there and we are with them in all kinds of different ways, and I think something that's really cool about a lot of the branches and wards is they'll linger longer afterwards.
Yeah.
And so we do have the opportunity where we're not just talking about, something out of the handbook. We're legitimately there, just like eating and talking, and like you said, having the opportunity for those things to come out. And it is, and like, it's good, it's happy, it's hard, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I'm curious, as we wrap up here, like, are there any like activities that your stake has done on the primary level, or things that you see the wards, as you visit different wards, that are unique or that work in your area, or anything come to mind?
I think, well, first of all, we do always have like a stake activity where everybody gets together.
Oh, cool.
But a couple of the things that come to mind are, especially since President Nelson is saying, hey, these kids can step up and do things that, we would be surprised about. And I feel like just we've had some opportunities where we've done that, and we've had a primary council where it legitimately was, the 10-year-olds, the valiant 10-year-olds, and they were like, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it. And it's cool to just kind of be the facilitator and just give them the structure, but then they take off and do it.
Yeah.
And they're literally like pen and paper in their suits, in their dresses, like, this is how we should do it. And it's amazing. And you feel like when you go to those activities that they've created, it feels so inspired. I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
we could have been, trying to figure that out for years before the kids came up with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about just like the dynamic of being the stake leader and helping the ward leaders, and any advice there? I mean, because there's obviously opportunity to maybe overstep your bounds or maybe not show up enough, or how do you approach that?
I think it's legitimately just relying on Heavenly Father. And I love how Elder Bednar has, basically said, if it's good, then it's of the Spirit. So I think it is a matter of just listening, paying attention, sometimes actually not talking at all. Because I find that that's where I need to just kind
Yeah.
of like listen. So, but I think when you do, just when you are open to the Spirit and you pay attention in the moment, you know what you need to do. And then that again allows them the opportunity to be able to share whatever it is that they're struggling with. But at the same time, I think just as a leader, one of the biggest things that I have learned is that I obviously am not in charge in any way, shape, or form. But obviously, too, I think it is just a matter of wanting to serve and the willingness to do that. And then it just, again, organically comes about.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other point, principle, story that we need to make sure we cover before we wrap up, or how do we do?
Well, I was just thinking, some of the biggest things that I've learned thus far in, the short time that I've been in here is how much closer I am to my Father in heaven. Um, and how much I know that he's there and he's listening. I have, many of times through this calling, I just legitimately go to him on my knees and plead with him. And I feel tethered to him. And I also think, being in the dynamic where I am single and I'm not necessarily talking to a spouse or somebody to bounce those things off of, I go to my Father in heaven and I know that um, he cares. Every single person, every single child, everybody in our state councils, as we're sitting there, and the feeling of love that I have for them, like, it's kind of like the analogy of you're a parent, you never know how much you're going to love until you're a parent, and then it's like, oh no, when you're a grandparent. But it's like, I thought I loved my ward, But now getting out and going to the stake and just feeling the love that Heavenly Father has for me personally has opened my eyes and my heart to how He knows everything that you're going through. And He loves everybody in this ward, and the love that I feel, I know I'm always hugging them and saying I love you, but they're probably not always so much like, why does she say I love you to everybody? But I really mean it with all my heart. That is the biggest thing, is the love that I have that has grown tremendously, even to strangers on the street kind of thing. And the primary songs going through my head as I have, been trying to learn the old ones and now the new ones. And it is the most amazing growth, I could say, probably, that I've had in these past 3 years.
Awesome. Well, you kind of naturally answered it, but maybe there's more here. The final question I typically ask is, as you reflect on your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, I think it does tie in very much so, but I think too it's just kind of wanting to step up your game. Because it's like, it's not just about me, and then you get in there, and at first I felt a little fearful, and that I'm not necessarily up to the task. But then as you just have that willingness to go forward to Heavenly Father and say, use me, help me to learn, help me to do the best things that I can for you. And then again, like the tethering yourself to Jesus Christ, in everything, and how they say pray always. It's like it doesn't stop. Like I'm constantly praying. And then I would say too, this is also the time where I've never gone to the temple this much. Luckily there's one close by, so it's just those things. And again, I know it's probably all primary answers legitimately, but at the same time, it really is. And the peace and the love. I'll just share one little thing real quick. My presidency, we had a time where we all went together to the temple. And this experience, I've had amazing spiritual experiences in instruction when I go, but this one particular time, I was just sitting there and had some, personal amazing experience while I was at the temple. But that love that I came out with changed me, like inside my body changed me. And it's like, again, that love that you go and you look at other people and you see them differently. And so that's where I feel is probably the biggest, trying to see God's children like He does.